I'm Indy Flo.
And I'm Flo.
And this is a special edition of the Great War on the Road. Now, we are actually driving from Przemyśl to Krakow on the Polish A4 highway. And we're driving there so they can drop me off at the airport so I can fly back to Stockholm while these guys drive back to Berlin. Bit of a drive.
Yeah.
Now, we've been here in Poland for most of a week, shooting a lot of material for some special episodes about Przemyśl, about Bolimov, about Lemberg and the Battle of Galicia. Those will come out later, but we thought we'd go over some highlights from the trip and just a general rundown of the actual trip itself and not the historical stuff we shot, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you guys actually got here before I did to the forest in Bolimov, so why don't you tell them about that?
Yeah, it was a pretty epic drive in the beginning. We started at 6 a.m. and arrived in Bolimov, and then we met Andrzej and Tomek, who are two World War I archaeologists.
Which is a cool job, being a World War I archaeologist.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, they're doing like an official archaeology project by the National Science Center in Krakow, and it's like the first big archaeological project about World War I in Poland. So, and they are digging along the front lines where the first major gas attack
at
Bolimov happened. Like in January, the Germans used tear gas on a large scale, and later in the summer they used chlorine gas on the Eastern Front.
Now the French had actually used gas first, but it was just tear gas in August of 1914. Thing about Bolimov,
and it was only in grenades.
And it was only in grenades. Thing about Bolimov, when the Germans deployed the gas shells, it was so cold. This was at the end of January 1915. It was so cold that the gas failed to deploy, right? But they advanced anyway. And of course, you know, when you take enemy trenches, there's things like fires that happen, that break out in war. And fires tend to warm up the gas shells, and then the gas deployed. So the Germans effectively gassed themselves in many of the trenches, which people don't actually realize. So their first gas attack turned out to be Germans gassing Germans.
That for example, was one of the, small but important facts we learned from the guys who are actually doing the digging there, because they're going through like diaries, Polish, Russian, German diaries. They're going through the chronology. They have maps from the battlefields. We went into the forest, stood right there in no man's land. Some really well preserved German trenches, some greatly preserved Russian trenches, and they showed us a few artifacts they found. It's really amazing what you can still find 100 years later, just by digging like half a meter down into the soil.
But we'll see that in our films.
Yeah, there was going to be a whole episode about that. We did an interview with them. So yeah, that was a really good start.
And I turned up in the afternoon and I landed in Warsaw, and two of our fans very kindly picked me up and drove me to meet them at another location where you could even see in the ground the zigzag of the trenches, of the German trenches. And so we watched them work and talk a little bit, the two main archaeologists, and they have like 15 apprentices and young volunteers and archaeologists. Then we went and had a Polish meal with them in Bolimov, population 900, one hotel, with a really, really tiny bed that didn't look like much because it was so narrow, you barely had room for your arms, but it was so comfortable, was it not? I mean, it was like the most comfortable bed, so it didn't have to be much wider because I'm fairly thin. No comments on that.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you. And then we had put out that any of our Polish fans could join us just to hang out in the evening, and we thought we'd get 4 or 5, but like 25 fans from different parts of Poland came to join us, which is pretty impressive because Bolimov is a one-horse town kind of in the middle of nowhere. So we went over to the archaeologist's base, and then we had a Polish barbecue in the evening, and we talked about the war with a whole bunch of our fans.
Yeah, it was really cool. Really, really awesome party. So yeah, and I mean, it was that was the first day. I think it was like we were up for like 20 hours or something, and then it was a good night on a narrow but comfortable bed.
Yeah.
And then we had to go all the way down from Warsaw. Basically, Bolimov is quite near to Warsaw. All the way down to Przemyśl.
And Przemyśl, the fortress town of Przemyśl, if you've watched this show at all, you know we mention it pretty much every week for the best part of a year during the 2 sieges of Przemyśl, which I'm not going to talk about now. But Przemyśl is actually fairly well preserved. It's quite a pretty old town. It's about 70,000 people, and the hotel was pretty nice there. And we went around by ourselves and looked at 2 of the 15 forts of the Outer Ring. And the next day we
didn't do it by ourselves. We did it.
Oh, we had it with Raphael.
Because we had a great Polish fan, Raphael, who is a how did you phrase it? Przemyślian. So he grew up in the town. He knew the forts, and he showed us around, showed us how well preserved they are.
The two forts that we went to that are the best preserved, that are privately preserved. It's not the government that's preserved it; it's privately.
Yeah, so that was like really mind blowing already. So then we went to a dinner. A few other fans showed up.
Right, from Slovakia. They came over from Slovakia, and then we got up early because we were supposed to meet the Przemysl world expert, and he's this guy named Tomas, and he's written 26 books, and which is surprising because he's not that old.
No.
And he took us around Borek and Sole Soglio, forts 1 and 15 of the outer ring of forts, and he explained all the earthworks and the history, and you guys are going to love the episode with him because he looks good on camera and he's really interesting. And talked to us what all the different rooms that you could do inside, in and out of the fortress were. And that was great. And then in the evening, there's a restaurant just outside of the center of Przemysl, which is an Austro-Hungarian imperial-themed restaurant.
Yeah.
So like food and decor from the empire. And you go in and it looks, we were alone there, and you go in and it looks like it's like 1902, and there's pictures of Franz Josef and Archduke Karl and Franz Ferdinand.
They play shellac records with old Austro-Hungarian songs.
And the food is like food you'd expect in Poland or in Galicia, but 100 and something plus years old, so it's not quite the same. Like I ordered a goulash dish, which is, well, everybody knows what goulash is, but this was goulash that had these sort of pancakes with it and a kind of cream and a shredded cabbage that was not sauerkraut but was really good anyway, and those awesome pickles.
Yeah, really good.
So the food was fantastic at the Austro-Hungarian restaurant.
The food generally in Poland was absolutely amazing.
Tip top.
Really good food.
So then we got up.
Wait, there's one more thing we did on that day. We actually went to, in the morning before we went to the forts, we actually went to a museum, to the Fortress Museum, which is in the city center of Przemysl.
Yeah.
And it's also a private collection, but man, they have a lot of stuff there.
They've got, instead of just like, usually you just see the empty shells of artillery shells that people fire, but they have unshot things. You can actually see the fuses and how complicated the clockwork and everything is in the fuses.
They have all kinds of rifles,
grenades,
helmets, 2 types of MGs, also some minor apparatus from the fortresses itself.
Yeah.
Like armor plates or these
and all the helmets.
Yeah, and these shields that the Austro-Hungarian soldiers used to when they were proning.
Yeah.
So just very impressive. Highly recommend going there.
And we shot 3 special episodes there.
Yeah, if you are in the city center of Przemysl, check this out. Then go to the fort. These two things together, the forts and the stuff in the museum, gives you a very good idea about how it was in World War I in that fortress.
Once you actually see like Borek and Sole Siglio, the 2 forts outer ring we went to, you'll see how suicidal it is for infantry to unsupported by artillery to even get close to attack. It's just ridiculous. You really get a good idea.
There's deep ditches, but we will talk about that in at least one very extensive, very detailed episode where we talk with the expert.
And then yesterday morning we got up, and our friend Ryan, who also works for Mediacraft, the network that finances us, or did from the beginning, came down from Warsaw. He speaks Polish, and he came to meet us to help us out in the Ukraine. And we walked across the border into Ukraine with no problem. Yeah. And we met a driver there who took us into the absolute middle of nowhere. I've never been so much in the middle of nowhere. Like we drive past some ramshackle houses with dozens of geese, but little kids that hadn't seen like a van in a month at least. It was like a huge event, right? And where we were driving to was 2 of the outermost forts of Przemysl Fortress that were across the border in the Ukraine, and these are completely overgrown, so you can really see what nature can do in 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you an idea, like the forts of Przemysl, you can see the fortress borders from standing up there. So the outer forts on the Ukrainian side are also basically a locked-off territory of the Ukrainian border. But we got in contact with some guys who had contact to the local authorities there, so that we got clearance to...
It's forbidden to go there, especially since there's you'll see it in the episode, but a Ukrainian boy died in one of the forts in the 80s, so they blocked it off for everybody. Yeah. So we were pretty lucky. And then another fan of ours named Roman joined us, and we drove down to Lviv together. And Lviv was awesome, right? And that's
absolutely beautiful town.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's huge and it's gorgeous. It's the architecture. A lot of the old buildings are still preserved. The late Austro-Hungarian period from the 1890s and the first decade of the 20th century. It looks, you see similar to like Prague and Vienna architecture, but you know it's a lot more Eastern. You can see the Eastern twist, so it was really cool. And first, he took us to lunch at this unbelievable Ukrainian restaurant, and that was like the best food we ate this trip. That was fantastic. And they had all these special wines that you can't buy, and they made their own spirits, and so we had a really fantastic lunch with Roman. And then he took us to meet Professor Alexander Losev from Ukrainian Catholic University, who is a World War I expert, much like us.
Yeah.
And we interviewed him about the Battle of Galicia and about ethnic Ukrainian regiments and other Ukrainian stuff during the war, and answering certain questions about, how the Austro-Hungarian elite, which we've mentioned, how they were worried that certain ethnic minorities, especially the Slavic ones like the Ukrainians, would defect to the Russians, and we talked a little bit about that, which you'll see in our regular episodes.
Yeah, one thing I thought was especially interesting is that he also gave us, since he speaks Russian as well, and of course English, and so he has access to all these kinds of different perspectives. Like he told us about a battle, which in Ukrainian history is very important because the mainly Ukrainian regiments fought.
And it highlights Ukrainian heroism and national identity, right?
Right? So it was a very important battle for them. In the Russian sources, it's highlighted as a disaster because they lost.
Yeah.
In the Austro-Hungarian sources, it's kind of like murky because they didn't want to emphasize that the Ukrainians did something to not get the national and feeling of independence up.
And in the Western sources, it's not mentioned.
Yeah, so it's like 4 completely different perspectives about one event. Very fascinating, for us as people who are, working with the sources.
So trying to get a fairly neutral thing. So then we drove back to the border. We said goodbye to Roma. And then although there were a lot of people waiting at the border, and we've heard it can take 4 or 5 hours and be a bit of a horror story, we actually were lucky and we went right through. We walked across the border, took a taxi back to Przemyśl, shot some more stuff, shot some out of the trenches, had another nice dinner, collapsed into our beds because this has been an exhausting week. Woke up this morning, had some breakfast. It's Julian's birthday today, so you can turn the camera around, and so we said happy birthday to Julian at breakfast, got in the van, and now we're headed down the A4 to drop me off at the Krakow airport. And that is what we did this week on the Great War on the road.
It was a fantastic experience.
Oh yeah.
Couldn't have been better. We want to really thank everybody who helped us. From the places we went to. Polish hospitality was really phenomenal. Great food,
Ukrainian.
Great food, friendly people. Yeah, Ukrainian hospitality also.
And I've never been to either Poland or the Ukraine before, and both of them I had a fantastic week. And I am definitely going back to Lviv, and I recommend it warmly to anyone that wants just a really fun party city to eat and drink at for a weekend and just have a really nice time.
We will post the locations where we went to on a map. I will post it in the description. It's a nice trip down here. There's so much history here. Definitely go to the Lower Carpathian Galician region. Absolutely worth it.
And between Przemyśl and Lviv, other than the border crossing, it's only about an hour and a half total travel time. So you can hit both of them if you do a trip. And it's totally worth doing. We'd like to thank all of our Patreon supporters because we would never have been able to do this trip without raising the amount of money we've raised on Patreon. And everybody out there, you might think you cannot afford to help us, and that may well be true, but even pledging $1 a month, a few thousand people doing that, that's a few $1,000s a month. And then we can have more trips like this, and we can see more of the original locations.
And you can meet us.
Because, we met a lot of fans this time.
Yeah, it was really good.
And it was really cool. So this was a fantastic trip, and we would love to do more. So keep watching. See you next time.
Bye-bye.